What do you got for me?
What's wrong with you people?
I got nothing for you.
What's wrong?
You're not David. How do y'all feel this morning? I feel rotten. That's how I feel. Well, that was enough for me. We could have had the benediction right there. That was so good.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to The Reformatory, the podcast for the local church and by the local church. And we are your local churchmen. My name is Josh, and I am here, as always, with my co-host in crime, Captain Jack Barry.
Mm-hmm.
Cap Daddy.
Yes.
What's going on, man?
Part two of, of our situation we got going on here.
Right. So we knew that doing the ep that we did on talking about Acts 29, we talked a lot in that episode about what we think is wrong, what we've experienced that is wrong, but not as much as either of us wanted to on some things that we would suggest to help the situation, right? To actually remedy the situation. So we don't want to be the people that just complain and then don't offer solutions, right? Because we know plenty of those types of people, and they all live on Twitter.
X, if you will.
X. Yes. Sorry, X. And we didn't want to be those type of critiquers. So that being the case, we wanted to release kind of a bonus episode, just kind of in response to the one that we released. It'll probably go out the same day. I think I'm just going to release them, just probably 5 minutes, from each other. But yeah, so in that previous episode, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, go listen to that one first, because this one's not going to really make a whole lot of sense. So go listen to the episode entitled "Let's Talk About Acts 29," and then come back to this one, which is basically just a continuation of that conversation. But Jack, in that episode, we talked about our experience with the Acts 29 network, the frustration and the a lot of pain that has come from that network, a lot of the things that we see in the network that we would consider to be wrong and needs to be dealt with, and so far the vast majority of them has not been dealt with. Right? So that's kind of what last episode was. And it wasn't a fun ep, but we mentioned in that one that these conversations, because it just seems to be running rampant like a wildfire, and there's not a whole lot of work being done to like actually remedy the situation, these types of conversations need to be had. And that's what we did last week. So this week, or I would say
last episode,
same day. Yeah. This episode. Thank you. Yeah. I'm in autopilot mode. This episode, we wanted to talk a little bit about how we think some of these problems can be solved, and some remedies to some of the issues that we talked about, in our opinion. So we're not going to be doing any cigar reviews or anything like that. This is basically just going to be kind of a continuation of that last episode, because we want to make sure that we're clear. Whenever you do any type of critique of ministries or networks or anything like that, you have to make sure that you are as clear and concise as possible, and that you offer solutions. That's something that we want to try to do here. So, Jack, I've got a small list just on my phone here of things that, as I was thinking about things that would have remedied the situation that I went through. Again, I described that situation in some detail on that last episode. If you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that first. But as I think through that whole experience, there's a lot that goes through my mind, and there's some things that I believe if these types of things were in place or practiced, a different outcome possibly would have happened.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you have thoughts on solutions and remedies for this network as well. So I say
have 5 suggestions, but yeah, I would say kick off first, and then we can definitely talk through them.
So the first one, and we alluded to this a little bit on the last ep, something that has plagued the Acts 29 network since its conception is unqualified leaders.
Sure.
And we talked about that a little bit on the last step. But Acts 29, if it is going to succeed in its mission to plant healthy churches, which is what I know it wants to do, it's to the point, in my opinion, that the entire leadership needs an overhaul. That we have seen over and over and over again, directors after directors being removed from leadership, starting with one of the A29's founders, old Mark Driscoll, right?
Yeah.
You got Mark Driscoll that has been removed for tyrannical and abusive leadership. The most recent one, Steve Timmis, who was involved in some of the stuff that went on in my church. He was removed back in, I think it was 2020.
Yeah.
For abusive and tyrannical leadership. Even more recent, a guy named Sean Garman, who was very involved. Actually, I had conversations with Sean. He was in our church, in our meetings. He was part of the board that took over the church. He has since left Acts 29 under interesting circumstances.
Sure.
Right? Let's go to the very top. Matt Chandler. Like, it's the golden boy. It seems like for so many people, his ministry, it just seems like it has just been hit again and again and again with weird accusations, weird reasons why he's on sabbatical, and he still and he still comes back to the pulpit.
Yeah.
Now again, like, I don't want this just to turn into we're not trying to bash anybody, but my point is this, like, if you have, from the beginning of the network, that many people, and those are just the ones that are off the top of my head. There are so many more pastors and so many more directors and leaders within the A29 network that have been removed because of leadership style, right? Yeah. And I have later in one of my points as to why those types of leaders are. It seems to be that A29 attracts that type of leader, but that's a little later. But Jack, the entire structure needs an overhaul. And what I mean by that is that if Acts 29 is going to actually succeed in their mission, and we're going to start actually seeing change that needs to happen, they need to actually take the qualifications that Scripture provides for a leader in the church. They need to take those seriously. Yeah. More seriously than they have. Because if all of these individuals that are being removed and that have been removed is just a testament, in my opinion, to Acts 29's lack of, I don't know if it's lack of understanding or a lack of willingness to dig as deep as they should when considering an individual for leadership, whether in the network or in the local churches. So that's number one on my list.
Yep. No, I mean, yeah, there's no huge significant difference that I would have with that. I would say that maybe even a way of qualifying leadership too would be to maybe look within members of local churches first.
Yeah. Wow.
Or
novel idea.
Or just how about look at different pastors. I mean, and here's the thing too. Pastors, depending on, we're assuming that all of the churches that we're talking about within the Acts 29 network have lead pastors. Mm-hmm. There is going to be I think a way in which you could probably have a lead pastor of a church function, and maybe this is my critique too, is more of like a how about you guys make it into a way in which you have not just one stationary president that gets all the money, that's paid all the time, but you have it like other denominations have had it, where you have a rotating president in which you can bring more diversity of thought, and it helps out basically, steer, 829 network in the direction that you want to go. I would recommend that based upon what you just said. I think it helps out with getting more voices in to leadership versus just having stationary executives and that's it, versus people who are actually on and in a local church that can speak to issues. So that would be my caveat to that.
Yep. Yeah. No, I agree with that, man. I think having rotating leadership in the network would be a good thing. Because I think you have too many guys that just kind of get seated in that position of power. And once you're in, it just kind of turns into an old boys network, which is something that I have observed in the Acts 29 network. Is it really turns into that really, really quick. And if you aren't part of the group, if you aren't part of the vibe, and you don't kind of fit the ethos of what they're going for, you find yourself very much on the outside and not really part of the cool kids club, which is honestly like what it turns into. Which kind of leads into the next point. One of the issues that I have observed over the years, and I really dug into this as kind of things were blowing up at my church. Acts 29 has an unhealthy emphasis on the lead pastor. What the lead pastor needs to look like, what he needs to be, his personality, even down to doing personality tests and Myers-Briggs and the freaking Enneagram and things like this to decide whether or not you are quote unquote lead pastor material, right? And here's the thing. It has turned into a meme that it's so obvious that there is a brand that Acts 29 goes with for their lead guys, right? It's that A-type personality, right? He's usually somewhat of a good-looking guy, usually fit, very, very...
does CrossFit.
Does CrossFit,
Sorry,
dude. I don't know what it is. It's true. I don't know what it is with the CrossFit in Acts 29. But it's such a weird Venn diagram, man. But anyone who's spent any amount of time in the network knows what I'm talking about. It's a certain vibe that you see Acts 29 going after, right? And that certain vibe attracts a certain type of individual. And that certain type of individual that they go for personality-wise across, more often than not, struggles with the same kind of stuff. Because if you have a guy who's very confident, who's used to being very influential, who's used to being the center of attention, who's used to being out in front of everybody, right? Which is the type of guy that Acts 29 attracts and goes after. More often than not, those types of guys often struggle with some of the same sins. And it's pride and it's arrogance. Because they're used to being out in front. And it breeds that, right? That's not true across the board. Right? I'm not saying that of every pastor or every lead pastor that's in Acts 29. But those dots connect. The dots connect. And if you have a very certain type of demographic of person and a very specific demographic of person, it's only logical that that same demographic of person is often going to struggle with kind of the same issues.
Yeah.
And that's part of the problem, Jack, is there's such an emphasis placed in the Acts 29 network on the lead pastor, and it's to the detriment of any of the other elders, because what they do is they set that lead pastor up as the vision caster. He's the guy that steers the ship, and unless he's in blatant sin or anything like that, the other elders effectively are there to support the vision that the lead pastor casts. Right?
Yeah.
Now, that's not every Acts 29 church, but that is by and large the model that is provided and that is taught through the network. And that's something that I experienced, and I know it's something that you've experienced.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it is one of the main contributors to all of these problems that we're seeing in these network, is that they are putting all of their they're throwing everything on the main guy to the point where unintentionally he's set up to fail because of all of the emphasis that's being placed on his shoulders.
Yeah, and Josh and I have talked about the fact that we think a legitimate plurality of elders is a much more biblical model to a first among, quote unquote, first among equals model that we would say is taken from Roman antiquity.
Oh yeah,
mixed
that's
in, mixed in with now the CEO kind of business model of modern America, and you kind of have this newer invention of what it means to be a lead pastor versus, I think, the traditional understanding of it, which Josh and I both adhere to, which is more of a shepherding role. You're teaching and you're shepherding hearts. This is not a business. Okay? You are not making revenue. You are literally having to walk through life, through the Christian life, with other Christians and to help them in that walk. If we keep looking at the church as a business, we're going to treat it like a business, and that equates to very unbiblical things, to be quite honest. So,
yeah. Yep. 100% agree with that. Next thing on my list is the network. They got to stay out of church's business.
yeah.
I don't know how else to say it. They got to stay out of the business. You know something that was interesting, Jack. When I put that little thing that little Twitter thread that I threw out there that kind of prompted this episode, as I was just kind of thinking through like things that have gone on and stuff like that. One of the main not clapbacks, but I guess one of the main comments that I got was people shocked, and these are people I believe that are either have been or are currently in the Acts 29 network, very shocked that the network would come in and take over the church the way that they did, right? And you have a bunch of I had a few comments of people saying like, that doesn't make sense. That I've never heard that before. I've never heard of the network having anything to do with churches except to remove them if they're out of compliance of, the bylaws and things like that, right? Which to be fair, I understand. If you're running a network, your churches need to be in line with the network. Otherwise, the church has got to go. Like that's fine. I understand that aspect of stuff, but they were really surprised that the network itself and the leaders within the network would come in to that situation and insert themselves into that situation and basically take it over. Which tells me a couple things. Either the network is very shrewd and very specific on who they do that with and who they don't, or they're not supposed to, and you have guys, and this is more so where I've landed, in my opinion. You have guys that are unqualified in those positions of leadership, like we've already talked about, that struggle with pride and arrogance and having their way, which is a lot of what Acts 29 is known for.
Yeah.
And they got a little big for their britches, and they came in and just torched, went scorched earth on the church because they can.
Yeah.
Right? And like, Jack, what was interesting is that throughout that entire process, this isn't something that I mentioned, but throughout that entire process of these Acts 29 guys, both local church guys as well as directors, regional directors, right?
Yeah.
Coming in and doing this, there was a long list of local pastors in our area that wrote a letter to all of them condemning what they were doing and calling them to repent. It was awesome. And Acts 29 ignored it.
Ugh.
They ignored it. You had local church pastors from the entire area that we were in, from the different towns, right? As our congregation is like reaching out to anyone to help us, right? Because our leadership's not doing it. Our leadership, like the only pastors that we trusted just got removed.
Yeah.
So now we're left with this provisional board. We're reaching out to everyone that we can, right? And the conversation I had with Matt Chandler went nowhere. Sent a long letter that I ended up drafting a letter that over half the church signed, and it got sent to all of the board members of Acts 29, including Steve Timmis at the time. I know he got it. And the response was to simply, and I have this in email. The response was just to delegate to the regional directors of the area. To which I responded, "It's the regional director. Like, they're the problem."
Yeah.
Nothing, dude.
I would say
yeah.
this. I would say and to counter what you were talking about too. If the Acts 29 network wants to be involved in that specific way, then become a denomination at that point.
Sure.
Not a way or because here's the thing. You can either be a movement or an institution. I feel like they've acted so much like a movement, but they want to be an institution, or people within the movement want to be an institution so bad that they try and flex those institutional muscles to where they're not really in that role to do that. And then on top of it, I think guys, going back to the whole idea of there's a certain type of person that Acts 29 attracts, you had guys who were trying to just do a hostile takeover. Yeah. They're just trying to basically take a hostile takeover business situation to a local church, and it doesn't happen that way of what we can tell scripturally. Josh and I both know this. If you really want, and this is even going back to a way in which our kind of 16 kind of more particular Baptist congregationalism kind of works, and where if you want change to happen, it needs to happen in the local church first. Yeah. And then I would say, then if that is failing, then you get your denominational leaders involved, and then try and have more conversation that way. Not just, one guy going rogue and calling in big guns who really, they aren't, at the time, I'm assuming these guys, your regional directors and everybody like that, weren't pastors either.
Some of them were, some of them weren't.
Okay.
You definitely had a mix. Yeah, for sure. You definitely had a mix.
So it just goes back to, is there, this goes, do you want to be an institution, or do you want to be a movement? And pick a lane, because you have to act that way. Okay, then start acting. If you want to just be a movement, and don't mess with the autonomy of the local church when stuff happens. Just let that go and be like kind of consultants at that point, but don't insert yourself like you're an archbishop or anything, a denominational leader, when you guys really aren't a denomination. Yeah. So.
Yep. Yeah. You got to let churches be autonomous and let them work their own issues out, right?
Or at the most, draft new standard procedures in how to go about that. Yeah. Especially, I think, even going back to your point of other local Acts 29 churches around you, maybe there's a way in which you can basically have sort of I don't think we would call this necessarily a presbytery, but have a way in which you have some type of, how can I say this? Like backup in case something happens in a local church.
Sure.
Where you basically have local churches in that area specifically come alongside them to be the accountability that they need, versus outside influences just trying to come in there and wreck shop.
Yeah, I would say bare minimum, if you're going to comprise an advisory team, make sure that they're not close friends of one of the parties that's in conflict.
Yeah.
Right? Like, actually, let's be fair here.
Yeah.
and be realistic about the conflict of interest that's there, right? Because if you're coming in wanting to help a situation where there is already so much distrust going on, man, you got to be so careful to be above board and be above reproach in that process. Otherwise, your integrity is just going to go out the window. And that's honestly what happened. Is it became very clear that advisory board was not here for the congregation. They were here for the lead pastor.
Yeah. And
that became glaringly obvious very, very quickly. Last one that I got, Jack, and then we can wrap up. Last one that I got, and this one will sound funny, but I honestly think that it does contribute to a lot of the issues. Like, if they just Acts 29, they have to stop trying to be cool. I'm so sick and tired. And I say this a little little tongue in cheek, but it's real. It's more real than sarcastic. I'm so sick and tired of the cool pastor. I am done with it, man. Like I'm it's so frustrating when I see such an emphasis placed on personality and outward image when it comes to a pastor. And that has been part of the Acts 29 network since its beginning, dude. They have always strived to be the cool kids on the block. And you see that in the pastors that they train up. You see that in the structure of the network. You see that in even in the culture and the aesthetic of the churches. Like, and again, like I'm not saying that, a pastor can't, look professional or look good or have cool hobbies. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying it's so obviously part of the whole vibe. It's part of the whole thing. And there's always been such a huge emphasis in Acts 29 on perception. How does this look? And I think that it really does contribute to so many issues, because again, like it all comes back to kind of those problems that I talked about. Is you're going to have you're going to be having that in the back of your head, and you're going to bring on guys that fit that, right? That fit that vibe. That kind of it's the cool, and I mean it's literally been memes. Like it's the cool hipster pastor, right? With his tight jeans and rolled up cuffs at the bottom and lace shiny shoes and the beard and the suspenders. And again, if your pastor dresses that way, it's not in and of itself is not indicative of anything bad. We're not gonna we're not gonna go the prophet Samuel here looking at David's brothers, right? But Jack, it is part of the ethos, if you will, of the network. And I'm so tired of the emphasis on being a cool pastor and having that be something that's attractive. I don't know about you, but I'm done with it.
Yeah, I think it's one critique that I had on my list, which was branding. A very big emphasis on branding.
Huge emphasis.
How that comes across to other people within your community as well too. Not only branding, but I would say the messaging that's happening within that local congregation. So like I talked about, there was an Acts 29 church, a couple families that came to one of our most recent Lord's Day services. And when an Acts 29 church says, you can only find the gospel here, like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, and some of my pastors have talked to those pastors of that church as well too. So you saying that you're the only ones that have the gospel, I mean, that goes back to, I think, an overhaul of what needs to happen in the understanding of being a church and having we talked about this Reformed Catholicity, right, with other churches. Not saying that I think Acts 29 is necessarily Reformed or Reformed leaning. I think they're kind of Calvinistic and Calvinism leaning. But, I mean, if you're going to have Catholicity with other churches, like, that's the last thing I feel like that doesn't help out your anything.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't help out your members.
Sure.
Knowing that they're part of the bigger church within that certain region, to know that they have allies within other local churches.
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest thing. Okay, I get it. You're a part of a different local church. Okay, that's fine. But we can be together in the gospel with this. And you
Right.
saying that you have a better version of the gospel than my church, that's arrogance. That's
Yeah.
arrogance, and that's cult-like behavior.
Yep.
That shows me that a lot of churches have not matured past that level of there are people outside of your network that actually are Christians
Yeah. Right.
and actually are on
Right.
mission and
Yeah.
actually are spreading the gospel, maybe better than you. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say there needs to be an emphasis too on stop trying to brand and rebrand your church. Everything.
Yeah.
That goes down from, I mean, I've seen constantly where it's like, oh, well, let's rebrand our name of how we do community groups.
Right.
It's like, why?
Right. Well, dude, that's what happened. Like after everything blew up at Damascus Road, they rebranded. It was like immediate.
Yeah.
New name, new website, new socials, everything. Let's just sweep it under the rug. Let's rebrand and let's move on like it never happened.
Yeah.
And it's just it's so it's just so manipulative and dishonest.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think that leads to my...
Because...
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. I'll let you get your final point because my question is that if everything was above board and you as the provisional board and you as the church stand behind your decision, why rebrand?
Yeah.
Why? Like why not be associated with your position? If you believe it was right and you believe it was done well, stand behind it.
Mm-hmm.
But you rebranded. Why?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
Sorry,
I think
go ahead and have your point, and then we'll get out of here.
Yeah, I think my final thought is there needs to be an emphasis on accountability and transparency. And if there is not an emphasis on that, nobody's going to trust you.
No.
And I can see it. No. I can see Acts 29 adjacent churches and Acts 29 churches right now in the South Puget Sound. Their members that have been there for 10 years don't trust those people anymore.
Yeah.
Because those leaders are showing themselves not to be transparent with members of their local church, which you should be, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then on top of it, the accountability isn't there. I think there needs to be an overhaul of the accountability structures to where if you have a lead pastor just doing whatever he wants with his elder board, and if his elder team is a whole bunch of yes men, who's holding them accountable? And
nobody.
If it's nobody, and if you have other people around you that are, and this is what I routinely ask myself, is that I see a couple pastors that are like this right now in the area that I'm in Tacoma, and there are other men that I know them. So why aren't those older men holding those other guys accountable? It's just a thought, man.
It's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, it could be many reasons. I don't know. You know, those are the questions those are the type of questions that do kind of keep me up at night. Is I, you know, like I find myself just up late, just think like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, am I the only one? Am I the only one that sees this? I can't be the only one that sees this. And I can't be the only one that's connecting the dots, seeing, okay, we have a problem here. And if left unaddressed, this is going to go here, this is going to go here, this is going to go here, and this is how it's going to end. It doesn't take a PhD in logic to connect the dots and use a little bit of discernment to see how a bad foundation is going to result in things tipping over. And I know I'm not the only one that sees this, but for some reason, by and large, nothing changes. And churches, as a result, continue to be broken. Individuals continue to be hurt. Souls continue to be abused. And unqualified leaders continue to be put in positions to where they are given the responsibility of shepherding the souls of God's elect. And that, to me, is unacceptable.
Yeah.
Because whether you're Acts 29, whether you're some other network, some denomination, if you are in leadership of God's people, you are called to be a shepherd, and you are called to represent Jesus Christ to those people. And if you step out of line, there's rules in Scripture for that.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
Okay? It's a sobering thing.
Yeah.
But it's meant to be sobering.
Yeah.
And if you are in a network that continues to shuffle these guys around, give them free passes, bring them back after disqualifying behavior, shame on you. Shame on you.
Yeah.
Like you're playing with people's souls. You're playing with people's lives. And to preserve what? Your image, your brand, your network. There's nothing worth the thing that you're trading. And like this is why I feel like we need to talk about this. It's just like I'm not trying to do a gotcha piece, but there's people dying out there, man. There's churches breaking out there. And the purity of the local church should be so important to us. And I know that there are many churches and many individuals, many that I know personally that are in this network. I love them dearly. And with that love comes just dread and worry, because I know the network that they're in.
Yeah.
And I know, like, unless they are unlike a lot of what Acts 29 propagates, it's a matter of time before I hear the same story, only it's with them. And now I'm on the phone with them. I'm on the phone with their people, talking them through the exact same thing that happened to me. And it happens again and again and again, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop.
Yeah.
So we're not going to stop it. Like, we're not in leadership, but
Yeah.
we can pray. We can make our suggestions, and we can do our diligence to sound the alarm when we see it. But at the end of the day, man, like, it's going to take the leaders and the individuals that are actually currently still in the network to make those changes, and I hope it happens. But
Yeah.
Jack, let's talk about something fun next week. All right,
Yeah,
let's get back to some good topics.
Yeah.
But why don't you get us out of here, man?
Yeah, if you appreciate Josh and I's conversation this last couple of episodes, and you want to continue that conversation on the Sociables, if you will, you can find us on the Facebook, the Metaverse, if you will, the Instagram, goes well with chocolate and marshmallow, or the Sociable formerly known as Twitter, which is X. You can find us all at those, the tags at Reformatory Pod on all of those sociable outlets. Josh, you can tell the people also how they might continue to support us in different ways here on the Reformatory.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are many ways you can support the Reformatory. If you're on Apple or Spotify, give us 5 stars. Give us some ratings. Maybe, help the podcast get out to more people. We'd really appreciate that. If you're a YouTube person and you like watching stuff, well, we have YouTube now. We're on YouTube. You can watch this as well as listen to it. So head on over to our YouTube page, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, as the kids say. Last but not least, there are people joining the Podluck, our all-access Patreon. More every week. People are joining like crazy. Don't miss out. Don't be the one person that's not showing up to the Podluck because you didn't show up. Don't do it, people. It's full of delicious good stuff for only $5 a month. That's like one pumpkin spice latte a month. You too could become a Patreon supporter, have access to all of that goodness, and our pledge to you is that your name shall be hallowed.
Hallowed, sir. Hallowed.
Hallowed through the halls of this podcast. We thank you all for listening, and we will catch you on the next step of the Reformatory.